Good morning. Today is Friday, August the 13th, 2021. And I'm out here today. I haven't recorded anything in a while. I am behind the ADOS movement 100% and so forth. And I know we have different people that are trying to talk against ADOS and this and that. Listen, I know my family history. I know that my mama's line comes from East Africa, and I know my daddy's line is West Africa. And I know the stories that have been told in my family. But if we're going to get reparations for the American descendants of slavery, we need to concentrate on the black slaves that were in America and so forth. And then we can spread abroad. But in the meantime, I'm behind the ADOS movement 100%. I know there's white supremacy and it's a global pandemic and it's just fucking up black lives all over the planet. But we have to be strategic about this. Because when you're trying to win the war, you got to do your guerrilla scraps and so forth and move on. But in the meantime, let me concentrate on the American descendants of slaves here in the United States of America. And this is the deal. I'm behind Antonio Moore and Miss Yvette Cornell 100%. I'm behind a lot of people. I love Dr. Umar Johnson. Dr. Johnson, I've learned a lot from you. And then there's some other ones and so forth. But in the meantime, the great John Henry Clark, who I have been following his guidance for more than 30 some years. You have to learn how to observe and pick strategies from everybody. Because not one person is correct, but you have to learn to pick your strategies and so forth and learn from everybody. Just sit back and observe. Hell, I studied a goddamn white man and I picked shit from his ass. But in the meantime, back to the ADOS movement. To get reparations for the American descendants of slaves. Because from 1619 forward until the end of the American Civil War, and with this white supremacy just everywhere, but let me just concentrate on the American descendants of slaves. All of my great-grandparents, every last one of them was a slave. And most of them started in Virginia, and they were sold to slave traders down up from Mississippi. Well, anyway, make a long story short, because on my mom's side of the family, my grandpa, Doc Wilson, was sold as a 4-year-old along with his mom from a plantation in Virginia to a traveling slave trader from Rankin County, Mississippi. And just so happened, my grandpa Doc's father was Robert Todd Lincoln. And of course, you know, Robert Todd Lincoln's father was Abraham Lincoln. But yes, Robert Todd Lincoln was down in the slave quarters on the plantation in Virginia when he was probably 18, 19 years old and got my grandmama pregnant. But anyway, my grandfather, who was the product of that relationship, and let me back up something. Robert Todd Lincoln was not a white man. He was an octoroon because Abraham Lincoln was not white. He was black. And be it as it may, and whoever don't want to believe me, fuck you, I don't care. Because if you think that I'm going to believe those racist ass newspapers from back in the day who kept saying that Lincoln had a dirty complexion, no, he was black and they just didn't want to admit it. And I do not watch the white supremacy practice in the media. I don't read that bullshit either. And if you think that I'm going to sit here and believe some shit that was wrote back in the day, I got some swampland for you. But anyway, yes, my grandpa, Doc Wilson, was sold as a 4-year-old slave. His son of Robert Todd Lincoln and Abraham Lincoln was his grandfather. But anyway, that's to be told at another time. But back to ADOS. I'm behind Antonio and Yvette 100%. Because we got to start somewhere to get the reparations for our people here in this country. And once we get that, maybe we'll just be the, the model for other people around the world who were slaves and so forth, because we know the slavery was all over the place. But no, we're concentrating on the United States right now, and we're dealing with the American descendants of slaves. Now, anything else y'all can add as historical background to it. And like I said, once again, I know my mom's people are originally from East Africa and my dad's people are West African. I am an African. just happened was transported here to America. But in the meantime, we got to start somewhere. I'm behind Antonio and Yvette 100%. And anybody else who don't like it, move on, because I tell you what, you know you're dealing with these crazy ass crackers over here in this country. And you know, if you're going to be strategic and win cases against them, you better be able to prove that grandma and grandpa were slaves in this country. Because you get there and get to talk, well, you know, it was Africa, this and that. We are concentrating on the United States of America right now and the black slaves who built this country with their lives and blood and wasn't paid a goddamn thing. Once again, the U.S. Congress will cut the checks and whatever. You have some people, well, we don't want checks. Well, I tell you what, you can ask for whatever you want to ask for. But in the meantime, the U.S. Congress is going to cut something. And they're going to cut some motherfucking checks. And this is it. Once again, we're concentrating on the American descendants of slavery. Because when you're going up against these crackers in this country, you better know what the fuck you talking about. You better have some goddamn receipts to prove that your folks were slaves in this country. And listen, and we can prove it. Because like I said, I know my folks were slaves in Mississippi. And most of them came from Virginia. But as far as these other people are concerned, guess what? If you in another part of the world, and I know slavery was all over, you do what you have to do. But we are talking about the American descendants of slavery. We trying to get this thing taken care of so we can get reparations. And once again, when you're dealing with Charlie and his group of henchmen, and you going in his courthouse with his unjust laws and this, your ass better have some kind of goddamn receipts. Because like I said, you know his motherfucking ass don't want to give you shit any goddamn way. But in the meantime, and I'm going to make this short, I am behind Antonio Moore and Miss Yvette Cornell 100%. Because don't get jealous of what they started. They started on a good foundation. Anybody can say what they want to say about them. They have a good foundation to start on. And then even some of these other people, I'm not going to mention any names, but I do love Dr. Umar Johnson. I love Dr. Johnson. I've been sharing all his stuff. And I love Miss Michi X. I love him. But in the meantime, Antonio Moore and Miss Yvette Cornell have a really good model to start with. Because before you can win the war, you got to be strategic in your battles. Yes. The American descendants of slavery, Adolf Society, I love the fact that they have that set up because once again, the American descendants of slaves, when you go into that courthouse to get them goddamn reparations to make Congress come through the right check, give land, whatever, you better have some goddamn receipts to prove that your folks were slaves in this country. And I know I can prove mine's slaves, and I'm like I said, with Antonio and Yvette, I'm sure they can prove it too. But once again, the fight right now is that in the United States of America, you got to have receipts to show these crackers that you know what you fucking talking about. Because my grandfather, Doc Wilson, was the grandson of President Abraham Lincoln, because Robert Todd Lincoln was his daddy. They sold my grandpa at the age of 4. He was a toddler, along with his mama off at the plantation in Virginia, and sent them. The traveling slave trader from Rankin County, Virginia, bought them. No, Rankin County, Mississippi bought them. And the reason why I know this here is because my mama told me the story, because my grandpa Doc told her the story. In fact, I'm going on 60 years old. I could have told this. I've been knowing this for over 50-some years, but my mom has dementia, and she's in the she has full-blown Alzheimer's now. And I promised her when she was in the best of health that I would tell the story, because I don't have to prove anything to anybody, but once again, I got the receipts. I know he was a slave, and I know my other grandparents were slaves in this goddamn country. And I can tell y'all one goddamn thing. If you can't show the receipts to Charlie's Congress's ass, we're not getting anywhere. But you got to prove that your folks were actually slaves in this country. And I know that a lot of black Americans can prove that. And I'm talking about the ones that were born in this country, the ones who know that the grandparents were slaves in Mississippi, Virginia, wherever. But we are not going to get sidetracked with that bullshit. Yes, I know my African roots. But I know my roots in goddamn America, and I know that my great grandparents and great great grandparents helped build this motherfucker for free. And if you don't have goddamn receipts, you know how Charlie wants to laugh in your goddamn face, because his ass has been a thief for centuries. And once again, Antonio Moore and Yvette Cornell have set up a really good model of how to get reparations, and anybody can try to go up against it if they want to. But I tell you what, once again, and I won a $1.5 million jury verdict against the United States government for discriminating against me because I was black. You better believe I had to have the motherfucking receipts to win that goddamn case, and I represented myself for a year, and I'm not even a lawyer, but I did discover that Johnny Cochran is related to me. But once again, when you go in Charlie's courtroom to try to get your reparations, you better show some goddamn receipts that your folks were actually slaves in this country. And that's the one thing that sets us aside from other blacks who come here from other parts of the world. And I'm sure, like I said, yes, in other parts of the world, the Caribbeans, England, whatever, they had slaves. But we're talking about the American descendants of slaves. And when we go in the American courthouse, going to ask Congress to give us our reparations, we're going to have the receipts to show that our great-grandparents were slaves in this country. And then, like I said, once we win the case and get the reparations, it can be used as a model to help win other cases around the world. And on that note, I am Mary Elizabeth Bass Murphy. I'm the G3 granddaughter of President Abraham Lincoln, the G2 granddaughter of his son Robert Todd Lincoln on my mom's side, and the G1 granddaughter of Mr. Doc Wilson, who was the son of Robert Todd Lincoln. My grandpa Doc and my grandma Frances had a total of 13 kids. Grandpa went and got 2 more, 15. There are thousands of black Lincoln descendants. And as far as my cousins who died back in the day in 75, a Lincoln's line has not been decimated. And listen, there are more Lincoln descendants now than there ever was. And on that note, y'all have a great one. Social distance, mask up, because the Delta variant of the coronavirus ain't playing, because the monsters who created that goddamn virus, well, guess what? The God of the universe says, okay, you want to depopulate the planet? Well, guess what? We killing your ass too. On that note, goodbye.